pleasure and a burden in the right way to be here today to present God's word to you. I never take that lightly, never, because his word is life, it's truth, it's eternal. And so to stand up here before you and share his word is a serious thing to me and a joyous thing. Anyway, Jason asked me to speak on being passionate for the presence of God. And that is one of our core values, to be passionate for the presence of God. Not just desiring the presence of God, but being passionate. And not just being passionate, but being passionate for the presence of God. And this is a very special subject to me. He did not know that when he asked me to speak on it, but it is a very special subject to me. When I first looked at this, I thought, okay, passion. I'm going to find out the real definition of passion, because sometimes there's real truth kind of in that nugget of what the actual definition is. But passion is passion. It's just an intense or strong feeling or emotion. So it's exactly what it says it is. There's no hidden meaning. It's just passion. And we're discussing the passion for the presence of the Lord, the presence of God, to have his presence here, to have a passion for that. So many people come to church and they just come out of duty, or they come and they sing the songs. But do you have a passion, a yearning, a longing to meet Jesus here, to see and feel and touch Jesus here? That's what it is to have a passion for God's presence. It's not a maybe, it's a passion. It's a driving force within you to meet with Jesus. In the Bible, there are many, many people that had a passion to meet God, to meet Jesus. And I'm going to show you a few examples of that passion. And one was Zacchaeus. I mean, there's just one tiny little story in the Bible about Zacchaeus. And he was a little short man, and he heard that Jesus was coming and going to pass by his town. And so what he did was he went out among the crowd to try and see Jesus, just to see him. He was a tax collector. He was shunned by everybody because they weren't honest. They didn't just take the taxes, but they demanded extra money. And so he was looked down on by everybody else, but he'd heard about Jesus. And I think he thought, if I could just see him, maybe I'd feel better about myself. And so he got out there, and of course the crowd didn't like him, so they weren't even going to let him be anywhere near where Jesus was. And so he thought, okay, I'm going to climb this tree. His passion, his desire to be in the presence of Jesus was enough for him to look foolish and climb that tree just so he could see Jesus. And you know the story. He saw Jesus coming, and Jesus saw him. And it went into Zacchaeus' house, and when Zacchaeus came back out, he was a different man. But Zacchaeus had a passion. He wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. He was going to see Jesus. And we have to have that passion within us. Or we can come to church and sit in a chair and go home and never have really met Jesus. So we have to have that passion. Another one is the blind man that was on the side of the road. And Jesus was coming, and the people were shouting, and oh, how wonderful it is, Jesus is coming. And the blind man wanted to go see Jesus. And he tried to get to where he could get to the side of the road, and the people blocked his way and said, "You're not important, you go back there." But he didn't stop. He didn't wait. He cried out, "Jesus, Jesus, Son of David." He called out, and Jesus heard him. And Jesus came and touched his eyes and gave him sight. We have to push through the crowd. We have to, we can come in here and we can have 100 thoughts going through our mind. You know that we've been praying for my sister. Well, just before I left to come here, I got news that she's unconscious again. everything is bad again. You know, I could have felt really, really bad. I could have felt, I can't do this today. But no, I'm going to push through. I'm going to push through. That is only the work of Satan. I'm not going to accept that sickness. I'm not going to accept her situation. I'm going to press through because I want to be in the presence of the Lord right here today with you. So we need to press through just like that blind man did. And the crowds, whenever Jesus went anywhere, crowds gathered. He had to go out in a boat to be in a solitary place. Even if he went up into a mountain, they would follow him up in the mountain. They were so desirous to see him that they didn't let anything stop them. And if we as a church want to be a church that is known for the presence of God dwelling here, really dwelling here, then we have got to push through everything else. We've got to push through everything and desire one thing, the presence of God. It has to be passionate. We have to have a passion. We all want the presence of God here. We want to feel his presence. But how often can you say, boy, I really felt the presence of God today, either in your devotions or when you come to church? Sometimes we come to church and it's a good meeting, but did you really feel the presence of God? If you haven't, then it might be that you need to increase that passion. Just ask God, seek him for that presence. In the Old Testament, the presence of God was hidden behind a curtain. It was actually put into a box, which was called the Ark of the Covenant, and it was hidden behind a curtain. And I looked up that curtain this week, because I thought this is kind of an amazing thing. And I'll get into it more in a little bit, but it was behind the curtain, and nobody could go there. Nobody could go where the presence of God was. Only the priest could go, high priest, and only once in a year. And then he had to have a rope tied on it. He had little bells on the hem of his garment, and he had a rope tied on him, because if he was not pure, if he was not holy through sacrifice, then he would die in the presence of God. Thank God we can openly come before his presence. We don't have to have bells on us. We could ring a bell, but we don't have to have bells on it. We can just come before the presence of God and know that we're going to be received. Know it. We don't have to worry. We don't have to question. We don't have to be fearful. Do you know how thick that curtain was? How thick that division? I never realized this. It was 30 feet wide. It was 60 feet tall. 60 feet tall. This is the amazing part. I have little hands, but it says it was the width of a man's hand wide. I thought, how do you get material to be that wide? So teacher brain, I looked it up to figure it out. And what they did, that curtain was actually made up of squares. Now there's something in that too. It was made up in squares, sewn together, stitched together, and then each layer was stitched together until you had something that was, about like this thick? A curtain that thick. And that separated. That was a huge separation between the presence of God and the people. Praise God. We don't have that any longer. That was torn. It was torn when Jesus died on the cross. There was a separation in that curtain so that the presence of God was open among the people again. And another interesting thing about it, when they would have to move the curtain, it would take 300 priests to carry the curtain. That huge. To me, that's amazing. That was a huge separation. And of course, we know it's sin that separates us from God. And so that was representing the sin of the world, the sin of mankind. But Jesus died for our sin. So that curtain was torn in half. No longer is there a separation. It is open for you and I and for everyone in Tacoma, everyone in the world. It is open. And as we have a passion in our church, in our body, in our lives, if we have a real passion to experience and know his presence in a very real way, it will draw people in. It really will. It will draw people in. We're going to talk a little bit about what does the presence of God feel like? How did the people in the Bible act in the presence of God when the presence of God was with them? And how do we develop a passion for the presence of God? Why is it important to experience God's presence? There's really an important reason, because as we experience God's presence, we are purified, we are made cleaner, we are made stronger. We actually can be healed emotionally, mentally, physically in the presence of God. So it's really important that we know and experience his presence. And it all starts with one thing: a hunger, a passion for his presence. That's why I was told to speak on being passionate for the presence of God. If you're not passionate for the presence of God, ask God. God, make me hungry. Make me hungry for your presence. Make me hungry to feel you at home when I'm just worshiping you. Help me to be hungry for your presence when I'm in church. Help me to be hungry. If we're fasting, there are certain things I'm sure that each one of you are really hungry for. And you're just thinking when we're done with this fast, boy, I'm going to go have that. Right? How many of you are kind of thinking that? I think probably quite a few, right? Because you're hungry for it, you're going to go get it. If we want the presence of God, we have got to be passionate for it. We've got to be hungry for it. We've got to want that presence of God. There's a difference between the presence of God in an overall manner, and there's when he comes down in a heavy presence. That is different, and you will know it when you feel it. If you desire that presence of God, what you need to do is begin to pray, Lord, make me hungry. Make me hungry for your presence. Stir me up. Make me unsatisfied. Make me unsatisfied with where I'm at. I want more. Teach me, show me, bring me, take me. I want more. And as you begin to pray that day after day, you will find that God will answer that prayer. He will actually bring you to a place where you will feel his presence in a new way. And I can't move these with this mic in my hand. In Luke chapter 10, is a verses 38 through 41. And it says, as Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by a big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord answered her and said, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these things. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken from her. one thing. There's one thing that's important, and that's desiring to be in the presence of God, to feel his presence, to be enveloped in his, in his presence. She wanted to know him. That's why she sat there. She was listening to every word that he spoke because she wanted to really know him. She wanted to know his heart. She wanted to know his message. She wanted to know who he was. And God answered that for her. She had a passion. She had a real passion to be in God and to be in Jesus's presence. She had that passion that just drew her to him and drew him to her. He noticed her. He saw her. He knew she was there to learn of him, to experience him, to be one with him. In John chapter, before I forget, that passion that she had didn't stop at just passion. She wanted to give back to him, and we're going to see that in this next verse. But that passion created within her a desire to give something back to Jesus. So in John chapter 12, verses 2 and 3, it says, a dinner was prepared in Jesus' honor. Martha served. Again, Martha's serving. She's real good at serving. And that's not a bad thing, but it's not the best thing. And Lazarus was among those who ate with him. And Lazarus by this time had died and had been risen from the dead. Then Mary took a 12-ounce jar of expensive perfume made from the essence of nard. And she anointed Jesus' feet with it, wiping his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance. She desired to give. She took the most expensive thing she had, and she anointed his feet. And she didn't stop there. She didn't stop at anointing his feet. She dried his feet with the hair of her head. In that action, it was like she became one with him. When we worship Jesus, when we worship God, in a very real sense, we become one with him. Church history repeats itself. When Jesus died and was resurrected, the church began. And it says that as they stayed together and they fellowshipped, there was 3,000 daily, was it, added to the church? I mean, it was just a real spectacular thing. And then years went on, and what happens is usually truth is revealed, and then division comes. And so as years went on in the church, there was division that came. Oh, I'm going to believe this, and I'm going to believe that, and I'm going to believe this. And there becomes division. And then with division, there comes persecution. People are persecuted for their beliefs. They're looked down on, they're ostracized, they're said they're wrong, they're false. But then there's a passion that begins, and a desire for truth. And so that truth that was revealed and treated wrongly becomes truth again. Well, it's always been truth, but it's accepted again. But then what happens is it's welcomed, but it goes overboard. It goes too far. And so we need to balance truth. And the reason I tell you all that is that if you want to really experience the presence of God, and if you want to have that passion that draws his presence to you, it's not a new thing. Sometimes people think that's a new thing, but it isn't. And I can look back in my history, and in the 70s, there was this movement, and it was called the Jesus People movement. And the church had a hard time with that. They didn't look right. They didn't act right. How could they possibly love Jesus? But they did. And the church I was going to, thank God, had a couple walk into our church, barefoot, shaggy hair, the whole thing. And we accepted them. We accepted them as they were, didn't ask them to change. And what happened in our church is God poured out His Spirit in such a way that we began to worship Him. And I'm telling you all this because I have to tell you, the only way I know how to really explain the passion that is needed and how God answers that passion is to give you this little bit of history. But that church, we just grew, and worship began to just, true worship just flowed from us, and for years. And then, unfortunately, people began to worship. And, they were going to guard that worship. And that's about the time that I left. But during the first outpouring of that worship, there was such a passion in all of us. We started coming to church every single night. Nobody said anything about a meeting. We just all showed up at church. And we would just sing and we would worship. Sometimes there'd be a word spoken. Sometimes not. We would just worship. But passion for the presence of Jesus, for the presence of God, that passion was it was like you could touch it. It was like it was thick, and I don't know how to pass that on to you, but it's like it was thick, this passion for more of Jesus. I just want more. I want more. I'm not satisfied. I want more. And at the same time, in my home devotions, I was reading the book of John, and I came to this scripture where Mary anointed his feet. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to anoint him. And I began praying, Lord, I just want to anoint you. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what I'm praying. Day in and day out, I would pray, Lord, I just want to anoint you. I want to anoint you. And during one of these services that we had these went on for over a month, every night. And one of those services, people got out, and I don't know if you know what they used to call a Jericho march, where they'd get out and they'd march around. Well, people did that, so I'm going to be out there, and boy, I'm going to be there too. And so we're marching around, and I got up by the front and went on, and I start to get really wobbly. And I go around a second time, and I'm more wobbly. I go around a third time, and I know I'm not going to keep standing up. So I thought what God wanted was, I'd heard about people fall in the Spirit of the Lord. So that's what I thought. I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And so I just said, Lord, just let me take one step out of line so they don't have to walk over me. I'm mispractical. And so I lifted up my foot. And I was up and down that aisle, leaping and twirling and dancing in the Spirit of God, never, eyes shut, never touched a pew. Up and down and up and down. And finally I thought, Noreen, you probably need to sit down. So I went over to try to sit down, and nope, there I go again. And it was the most, I don't even have a word for it, because I just knew I was worshiping my God and Savior. Finally, I was able to sit down. You know what the Lord said to me? Now you have anointed me like Mary did. That is not just for me. That is for everyone here. If you just let go and let God and be passionate, be hungry for His presence, you can have, it won't be the same thing. You may just, there were other times when I just laid on the floor and just like these wells of color and sound and music would just wash over me. Worshiping Him is real. It's real. And whatever you give to Him in your worship, He pours back onto you. And not only that, it will reach out. And when you go to pray for someone, when you go to pray for an area, that area will experience the touch of God because you have been with Him. You have been one with Him, and you're taking His Spirit out to the masses. That's when God called me to go to India. And that's a whole nother story, but that's when He called me to go to India, and I have been going ever since. Mary was rebuked. She was told she was wrong. She needed to, that she should have sold that perfume, and she should have given it the money to the poor. That's what should have been done. But Jesus told them, you'll have the poor with you always. She did this for me. When you really worship God, it is ministering unto Him. He ministers to us all the time. How many things does He do for us every single day? We have an opportunity to give to Him. Praise is different than worship. Praise we do as a body. And you can be joyous and you can be, sometimes you even look at each other and your praise is built up because you're just all rejoicing. It's a big spiritual party. Worship is different. Worship is very singular. You can be in a body, and you could be the only one really worshiping. And it's heavy. It's weighty. You can feel physically in your body worship. And I don't really know how to explain that, except that it's like that your worship ascends up to God, but His presence comes down, and He's a big God. He's a really big God. Worship, the first of the little comments. Worship is to regard with great or extravagant respect, honor, and devotion. You acknowledge God in who He is, who He has always been, and who He always will be. And in that worship, we are humbled. We are humbled. And that worship just arises. But it begins with a passionate desire. You have to be passionate in your desire to worship. Praise is easy. Worship has more depth. But worship, like I said before, will change you, and it'll change our reach to the community. The Ark of the Covenant, that I told you about the curtain. Well, the Ark of the Covenant was where the presence of God dwelt with the children of Israel. And one time they knew the power of the Ark of the Covenant, so for some reason somebody got the idea to take it out into the battlefield, and they would for sure be able to defeat the enemy. Well, we just already said that because of this big curtain, they were not supposed to even go back there. So evidently, Israel had gone so far away from God that his presence was no longer in the Ark of the Covenant, because they were able to go in and take it out. Well, the enemy captured the Ark of the Covenant, and they took it, and they took it to their city, and they put it in the temple right across from their god, Dagon. So here in this temple in a foreign city is this Ark of the Covenant that is God's presence with this idol, Dagon. And the Philistines felt pretty smug. They thought, boy, we've got it now. We can just take over everything. They went to bed at night and they got up in the morning, and their god, Dagon, had fallen over. And his head had fallen off. And so they so they put him back up and put his head back on. They went to bed again, and the next morning they get up and, well, he's fallen over again. And this time his head's off, but his hands are off. Now this is very significant. And I'm telling you this because we want to take the presence of God out. We want to feel the presence here. We want to worship and feel the presence here, but we want to take it out. Okay, when that false god fell over, the head is the thinking part, the part that makes plans, the part that is authority. That's the authority. There's a lot of false authority out there, a lot of false authority. The hands signify work. The work of the enemy, the work of Satan fills Tacoma, it fills Seattle, it fills the world. But the presence of God that is anointed on a worshiping people will defeat, it'll break the power and the authority of the enemy, and it will break the works of the enemy. If we, Restoration Tacoma, want to see Tacoma changed, we have got to begin to worship God and allow Him to fill us in such a way that when we walk out there, it's like the Ark of the Covenant walking among the people. And we can do that. We can do that. We can be that. It's not doing, it's a being. We can be that. We can be the very presence of God. But we so many times, I don't want to say fall short because we don't even realize, but we try to contain the presence of God, like in the covenant, Ark of the Covenant. We try to contain it. God's presence wants to break out. It wants to break out in this city. It wants to break out in this nation. I do not believe that America is washed up, because I look at the prodigal son, and he left. He went and he partied and he went so far down he was with the pigs. But when he made a turn to come back, the father ran to greet him. I believe America, that if we will make that turn to God, if we as His people will be so passionate for His presence, and that presence goes out among the people, we can see a change. And America can come back to God. It's not condemned. I've heard people say there's no return for America. I don't believe that. Sometimes, anyway, so David had seen the Ark of the Covenant. He knew that he knew it was held by the Philistines. And he thought, why should they have it? So he decided to bring it back, because that's the presence of God. So he wanted to bring it back to Jerusalem. And so they should have known how to bring it back. I don't know if David just didn't look into it, or that they had gone so far backwards that truth had been lost. But David built a new cart, and had them take the cart down to the Philistines, and the Philistines had already given it to someone else because they didn't want it anymore. And so they got they put the Ark of the Covenant on this cart, and we're bringing it back to this Jerusalem on this cart. And it hit a rut in the road, and it jostled. And so a man named, I think it was Uzzah, saw it start to jiggle, and so he reached out to steady it and fell over dead. God struck him dead for trying to touch that presence of God. God doesn't need our help. He just needs us to yield. Too many people, yes, it's good to have food kitchens. It's good to do the things that we do to help. But what God really needs is for us to be that Ark of the Covenant. He needs us to be the presence of God. And there's only one way, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But anyway, so then David takes the ark over to this other person's house, and it stays there. And he goes back to Jerusalem because he can't figure out what to do. What am I going to do? How can I get this cart back there? So he began to talk to the priests and ask them to begin to search and find out, how do we bring this back? Well, they were supposed to carry it on their shoulders. Have put a rod, there was areas where you could put a rod through, and 4 priests were to carry it on their shoulders. Shoulders always speak of burden bearing. If we want to bring the presence of God out into Tacoma, we're going to have to bear the burden of it. And that part of that burden of it is just being in the presence of God, just having God enter into our church services in such a way that we really begin to worship him and we really are filled with his presence. So then they brought the Ark of the Covenant in, and David, he strips his kingly robes off and he dances. He dances with abandonment all the way back to Jerusalem. So much so that his wife, it says his wife despised him. And she told him she despised him. Sometimes when we worship, it'll look foolish to other people. If they're not in the Spirit of God, it can look foolish. And they'll say, what are you doing now? But we can't look at what the world thinks. We can't look at what other Christians think. We need to just be between us and God and know that as we allow God to move within us, it's going to affect outside. Can you put the next little statement up? It says, the presence of God, if we allow it to, will bring us to a place where it is just me and him, or you and him. I told you the church that I went to, that time period, we began to worship in such beautiful ways. But you weren't aware of anyone else. It wasn't like, oh, what are they doing? It was simply you and God, and it was beautiful. But there was one thing that was common to everyone. We had an intense desire to be in the presence of God. We wanted to be in his presence. That's why we came together every single night, and why we were so hungry. And like I said before, praise is a group thing. Worship is individual. You can be in a group, but it's going to be very individual. You won't be... It's hard to explain. There is a book in the Bible that is a little tiny book, and a lot of people don't read it because they don't really understand it. But it's a Song of Solomon. And I would encourage you to read the Song of Solomon. Read it as Jesus is the shepherd, and you are the maiden, the shepherdess. And Jesus, or the shepherd, is wooing this little shepherdess. He's wooing her. And it comes to a point where he's at her door. And he says, "Come out to me, come." And she says, "Oh, I've just laid down. I'm just ready to sleep. I'm just ready to rest." And you know, sometimes we can feel that way. We're just tired. We're tired. We're tired of the same old thing. We're tired physically. We're tired mentally, emotionally. We're just tired. So she didn't get up. And finally she thought, "Oh, I'll get up and open the door." But when she went to the door to open the door, the shepherd was gone. He was gone. He wasn't there. And she went out and she walked the streets. She searched and she cried out, "Where is he? Where is he?" She had an intense desire to find the shepherd. If you want to really feel the presence of God and bring the presence of God in a very physical way into our body, you have got to seek him like she did. She didn't let anything go. It says she was even beaten. She was beaten by people in the street as she searched for this shepherd. And when she found him, there was just a beautiful love between them. We have to be willing to lay it all down. We have to be willing to lay it all. To find that place of passion where we really bring the presence of God into our homes, into our churches, into our lives. And as we do that, we will see a real change. The Bible tells us that we are the temple of God. His presence in the Old Testament dwelt in the temple of God, at the temple of Solomon, the tabernacle of Moses. Yeah, he lives here. Jesus lives here. But he wants more than that. He wants more than just living here. He wants to tabernacle with us. He wants to live within us to such a degree that we manifest him to those outside. And you will only come to that place as you allow him to minister to you in worship. You worship him and he fills you. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Another thing about worship, and you will see this in the world, you will see this especially among people that are involved with satanic things or even drugs or anything like that. You become like what you worship. You really do. You become like what you worship. So if you want more of Jesus, if you want to be more like him, worship him. Worship. Allow yourself to worship him. And as you worship him, we will bring the presence of God here in a very, very real way, and then take it out where the world so badly needs him. So